the darkest corners of the galaxy, there's a place where the stars themselves seem to scream. A labyrinth of impossible architecture, spires twisting into black infinity, streets alive with blood and shadow, skies torn by lightning that is not of nature but of tortured souls. This is not a world. This is Gomorrah, the city of shadows. And within its endless sprawl dwells a people who should not exist, a people who were once the pinnacle of perfection, but who became a reflection of everything corrupt, cruel, and depraved in the galaxy. They are the To outsiders, they are the dark elves, but to themselves, they are survivors' parasites feeding on agony to stave off the slow death of their souls. For the Drukhari, pain is not just a sensation, it is a currency, an addiction, a sacrament, and at the heart of it all is the most exquisite torture of all, the knowledge that there is no escape from this eternal night. Now, if that didn't get you excited enough, I don't know what will. So let's start at the beginning. Slaanesh, the most powerful of the Chaos Gods, also the least understood and the least known, even among those who serve him. What is certain is that his very existence represents the ultimate inversion of the light, the perversion of all creation, and the very antithesis of all life. To comprehend Slaanesh is to be driven insane. To behold his true form is to die. Yet here we are gathered today to peer into the abyss and discover what can be known about the Prince of Pleasure. This is a tale from the darkest corners of the warp, where demonic delights await. Are you ready? If so, enter the hellish realm of Slaanesh, the Lord of Excess, and prepare for a joyride into the heart of the most terrifying Chaos God. Let's get started. Long ago, before time had turned the universe into a battleground and the galaxy was young, the Eldari were at the height of their power. Billions upon billions of souls danced within their webway cities, each one a star in its own right, each one more beautiful and dazzling than the last. Yet they grew bored of it all. Oh, how they hated the stagnation of perfection. The craft worlds were a testament to their magnificence, a marvel of architecture and engineering. Their great vessels of war, the Wraithbone cruisers, were works of art. Each cruiser is a monument to the mastery of voidcraft possessed by the Eldari. With their lithe, elegant forms and deadly efficiency, the Eldari were the perfect race. Theirs was a civilization without conflict, a society without decay. They were masters of the warp, capable of moving entire planets from system to system as if they weighed nothing. But this perfection, this utter dominance over the material galaxy, bred arrogance, pride, and ultimately led to their doom. In the mortal galaxy, there exists a principle of balance, a law of nature that states nothing can exist without its opposite. In order for light to shine, darkness must exist. Without sadness, we could never know joy. There can be no feast without hunger, and without pain, pleasure would have no meaning. However, the Eldari refused to accept this truth. They sought only pleasure and shunned all things dark and negative. And so it was that their perfection became their weakness and their greatest sin, their inability to accept their own mortality. While the other races of the galaxy coped with the inevitability of death, the Eldari attempted to cheat it through their mastery of the warp. Using the raw power of they created the webway, a network of extra-dimensional pathways that allowed them to traverse the galaxy in an instant. And yet this victory over death only emphasized its inevitability. With every passing century, the Eldari became more decadent, indulging in pointless pleasures and trivial pursuits. But their hubris did not go unnoticed. In the darkest recesses of the warp, a new being stirred. A being born of the psychic energy of sentient beings. A being that fed on the emotions of the galaxy. As the Eldari plunged deeper and deeper into hedonism, their psychic residue became a banquet for this nascent entity, and it grew stronger with each passing moment. Soon, it was ready to make its presence felt. And so it was that Slaanesh made his move, corrupting the minds of the Eldari and turning brother against brother. Wars that had been unthinkable erupted across the galaxy. Entire craft worlds were destroyed, consumed by the fires of Slaanesh's madness, and as the Eldari fell, their negative emotions became fuel for the growing power of the new Chaos God. And then finally, the worst thing happened. Slaanesh turned on the Eldari, consuming their souls and obliterating their bodies. The galaxy watched in horror as the Eldari, once masters of the warp, became slaves to the very forces they had unleashed. Those few Eldari who managed to escape the fate of their brethren did so with a heavy price. They were forever tainted by the experience, cursed with the knowledge of their doom. Even now, in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, when the galaxy is engulfed in the fires of war and destruction, the Dark Eldar, or Drukhari, still live in terror of the day when Slaanesh will return to claim their souls. In their eternal struggle to avoid annihilation, the Dark Eldar have become masters of cruelty, inflicting pain on others in order to delay their own suffering. In that twisted view of the galaxy, everything must be consumed, even the pain of others, and so the Dark Eldar rule over the hellish landscapes of Camorra, waging war on all who cross their path and reveling in the suffering of their enemies. And yet, for all their cruelty and decadence, the Dark Eldar are only delaying the inevitable. For Slaanesh is patient, and he knows that sooner or later he will consume all of creation. Some say that Slaanesh rules over a dimension of pure sensation, a place where the boundaries between good and evil are blurred, and all that matters is the pursuit of pleasure. Others say that Slaanesh is a trickster god, a being of pure chaos, who delights in sowing discord and destruction among the other races of the galaxy. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of Slaanesh is the fact that he is both of these things. At once the epitome of excess, he is also the embodiment of destruction. The Dark Eldar know this well, and that is why they worship him with such fervor. For the Dark Eldar are the ultimate hedonists, and they understand the importance of living life to the fullest. They know that the galaxy is doomed, and they intend to enjoy every moment of it. That is why they wage endless wars, why they delight in torture and murder. It is all part of their twisted celebration of life. When the Dark Eldar engage in their favorite pastime of sadistic sport, they are not simply reveling in the suffering of their victims. They are also feeding Slaanesh, keeping him strong and powerful. In a sense, the Dark Eldar are the servants of Slaanesh, and they know it. That is why they take such pleasure in their role as entertainers in the great game of the warp. The Dark Eldar are doomed, but they are not helpless. They can stave off their inevitable fate by indulging in the pleasures of the flesh, by experiencing all that the galaxy has to offer, and by reveling in the chaos of war and destruction. And so the Dark Eldar live out their days in a frenzy of activity, always seeking new sensations, new horrors, and new pleasures. They are the ultimate hedonists, and they intend to enjoy every moment of their doomed existence. So what do you think of Slaanesh? Is he a force for good or evil? Or maybe he's just a being of pure chaos, indifferent to the suffering of mortals? Whatever you think, one thing is for sure. Slaanesh is a fascinating character and a truly terrifying enemy. Now it is your turn to take a stand against the forces of Slaanesh and defend the galaxy from the horrors of the warp. Will you answer the call, or will you fall prey to the temptations of the Prince of Pleasure? Only time will tell. So stay tuned for more tales from the darkest corners of the warp, and be sure to let me know what you think of Slaanesh and his followers in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, so you don't miss any of my future uploads. Until next time, may the Emperor protect you from the horrors of the warp. In this far-flung corner of the Warhammer 40k universe, there exists a place where pain is the ultimate pleasure, where agony is worshipped as a deity and the symphony of screams echoes through eternity. This is Camorra, the city of pain. The Dark Eldar are a race of sadistic hedonists who find pleasure in the darkest corners of the soul, and their home city, Camorra, is a testament to their twisted sensibilities. This sprawling metropolis is built deep within the webway, an extra-dimensional realm that serves as both a highway and a hiding place for the dark. Eldar Camorra is a labyrinth of impossible scale, a city that stretches beyond reason and defies the laws of reality. It is a realm where pain is the ultimate pleasure and agony is worshipped as a deity. Within its infinite districts, cruel pleasures and terrible tortures are the norm. Entire districts are dedicated to the worship of pain, where sadistic games are played out on a grand scale. It is a place where victims are suspended in midair, slowly drained of their life essence, while the Dark Eldar revel in their torment. In these pleasure gardens, screams are music to the Dark Eldar's ears, and despair is their ultimate drug. There are entire districts where men and women are locked in cages and forced to fight to the death for the amusement of the Dark Eldar elite. And it's not just humans who suffer here. The Dark Eldar take great pleasure in tormenting their own kind as well. Slaves are shackled to chariots like horses, whipping them until they collapse. Those who fail in their tasks are flayed alive, and even the most powerful warlords are not immune to the sadistic whims of the city. Camorra is a place where trust is a weakness, and betrayal is an art form. Friendships are forged in the fires of torment, and alliances are made and broken on a whim. In this city, you must be willing to do anything to survive, kill, or be killed. And even then there is no guarantee of survival. At the heart of Camorra lies the Dark City, the residence of the most powerful warlords and the seat of the city's government. It is here that the most sadistic and depraved pleasures are enjoyed, and where the most brutal punishments are carried out. The Dark City is also the home of the most cunning and ruthless Dark Eldar to ever live, Asdrubal Vecht, the Lord of Camorra. Vecht is a master manipulator who has clawed his way to the top of the Dark City's social hierarchy through sheer force of will and intellect. He rules not with brute strength or honor, but with patience, cunning, and a cruelty so refined that even his rivals dare not move against him. Yet even Vecht's rule is not absolute. For in Camorra, power is borrowed, never owned. Every day, Vecht must prove himself to be worthy of his position, or risk being overthrown by one of his many enemies. To maintain his power, he must play a delicate game of politics, manipulating the various factions and warlords of the Dark City to keep them in check. He is constantly surrounded by enemies, from the ruthless cult leaders of the pleasure quarters to the savage warlords of the blood and bone pits. Even Vecht's own family members are a threat to his power, with his sister, Aeneid, plotting to usurp him and claim the throne of Camorra for herself. Despite the constant danger, Vecht enjoys his life in Camorra. He takes great pleasure in the suffering of others, and delights in the chaos and depravity of the city. He is a collector of rare and exotic slaves, with his personal collection featuring some of the most beautiful and tormented souls from across the galaxy. Vecht is also a connoisseur of fine torture devices, with his chambers in the Dark City featuring some of the most advanced and sadistic instruments of torment ever devised by the Dark Eldar. When Vecht is not plotting or indulging in his pleasures, he can often be found in the company of his fellow Dark Eldar nobles, drinking wine, gambling, and engaging in all manner of debauchery. These gatherings are filled with backstabbing and scheming as the nobles vie for power and influence. But Vecht always manages to stay one step ahead of his rivals. But Vecht's greatest pleasure is the fear and respect that he commands from his subjects. He knows that at any moment, his enemies could turn on him and end his life, and he thrives on the constant danger. He is a true master of the Dark City, and his reign of terror shows no signs of ending soon. Now, imagine yourself stepping into this nightmarish realm. You find yourself in a vast and gloomy marketplace where the air is thick with the stench of decay and the cries of tortured souls. The buildings around you are tall and imposing, made of dark obsidian and twisted metal. They seem to reach out like grasping claws, eager to snatch you away and drag you into their shadowy depths. The only light comes from the flickering flames of nearby stalls where grotesque wares are displayed, from torture devices to cursed artifacts. As you navigate the crowded streets, you see Dark Eldar nobles lounging on ornate thrones, watching with amusement as their slaves fight to the death below. You hear the sickening thud of bodies hitting the ground and the gurgling screams of those who have met their end. You see fellow adventurers, desperate and afraid, hunted by vicious gangs of Dark Eldar warriors. Each step you take in this Nitmarish realm brings you closer to the edge of sanity. You feel the oppressive weight of Camorra pressing down on you, sapping your strength and filling you with dread. Suddenly, a group of Dark Eldar nobles approach you, their faces hidden behind grotesque masks. They offer you a chance to escape the city, to flee this living hell and return to the safety of your own realm. But as you reach out to shake their hands, you feel a searing pain shoot through your arm. You look down to see a wicked knife plunged deep into your flesh. You try to pull away, but it's too late. The Dark Eldar laugh, their voices echoing with cruel amusement as they drain your life force, leaving you weak and helpless in their grasp. This is Camorra, the eternal city of pain, where every shadow holds a new horror, every alley hides a new trap, and every smile is a prelude to a new nightmare. Here, The very air you breathe is a poison, and the only way out is through the gates of death. Will you escape this living hell, or will you be lost to the eternal city forever? It's time to make your choice. Do you dare to enter Camorra and face the horrors that await you? Or will you turn back and seek refuge in the safety of the mortal realm? If you choose to enter the city, prepare yourself for a journey into the darkest depths of the human psyche. A journey that will test your courage, your sanity, and your very soul. But if you decide to flee, know that the nightmares of Camorra will follow you home, haunting your dreams and tainting your reality. The decision is yours. Enter at your own peril. And with that, we come to the end of our descent into the eternal city of pain. Did you dare to venture into the heart of darkness, or did you turn back at the last moment? Either way, we hope you enjoyed this glimpse into the twisted world of the Dark Eldar. Remember, in Camorra, pain is pleasure and agony is bliss. The fate of your soul hangs in the balance. Until next time, may your choices be wise and your journeys be safe. But if you do find yourself in the clutches of the Dark Eldar, may you have the courage to resist and the strength to survive. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the darkest corners of the Warhammer 40k universe. We hope you have enjoyed this exploration of the eternal city of pain. If you would like to learn more about the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, be sure to visit our channel. We have countless videos on all aspects of this dystopian future, from the valiant heroes of the Imperium of Man to the terrifying monsters that lurk in the shadows. You can also learn about the Dark Eldar and their sadistic pleasures and agonizing punishments. So why wait? Join our growing community of fans and aficionados today, and let your journey into the grim darkness of the 41st millennium begin. The Dark Eldar are amongst the most sadistic and evil creatures in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. These depraved beings delight in nothing more than the suffering of others and will stop at nothing to acquire it. Whilst the craft world Eldar are dying out, the Dark Eldar are thriving. So what is it that makes these two branches of Eldar so different? To answer that question, we must look into the history of the Dark Eldar and how they became the way they are today. And so let's begin. The Dark Eldar or Drukhari are one of the two branches of the Eldar race, the other being the Craftworld Eldar. For eons, the two branches of the Eldar were united as one people until the fall of the Old Empire. When the Old Empire began to falter, the surviving Eldar retreated to the safety of the Webway, a vast network of extra-dimensional tunnels and pathways connecting many star systems across the galaxy. The Eldar hoped that by retreating into the Webway, they could escape the notice of their enemies, and that when the time was right, they would emerge once more and rebuild their empire. However, there were some Eldar who felt that if they were going to survive, they had to take a different path. This faction of the Eldar were known as the Visai Donith, or the unabashed rejected the teachings of Asaurian and Kain, and instead followed a new dark god, the Lord of Pain, also known as the Prince of Pleasure. The followers of the Lord of Pain believed that pain and pleasure were the only true constants in the universe, and that the path to power lay in embracing these things. With that, the Dark Eldar were born. Despite being an extremely powerful and numerous faction, the Dark Eldar never challenged the rule of the Old Empire. They were instead granted dominion over a single star system called Camorra, where they built a new city. Named after their home system, the Dark Eldar settled down and created a society based around pain and hedonism. Soon, however, this proved to be too much for them, as the Dark Eldar were inherently too savage to live in such a decadent society. This led to civil war, which resulted in the destruction of the city and the near annihilation of the Dark Eldar race. Luckily for the Dark Eldar, the fall of the Old Empire coincided with the birth of Slaanesh, the new chaos god of excess. Through her worship, the Dark Eldar were granted new life and the opportunity to build their new society. Not on a single planet, but on a whole new level. Using the power of Slaanesh, the Dark Eldar built a new city named Camorra and located it within the image. From here, the Dark Eldar launched attacks into the material universe through newly created portals known as the Webway. It was around this time that the Dark Eldar began to adopt a more streamlined body shape, which differentiated them from the Craftworld Eldar. Another difference between the two types of Eldar is the fact that the Dark Eldar still have tails. This is because the Dark Eldar were already changing into their new forms. When the fall of the old empire happened, the Craftworld Eldar, who are mostly unchanged during this period, retained their physical characteristics from before the fall. Back in Camorra, the Dark Eldar set about creating a new government for their city. The citizens of Camorra formed warrior houses or cabals, which acted as both military and criminal organizations. Each cabal is ruled over by a council of nobles known as the Eshenari, and the head of each house is known as a torturer. To gain favor with the Prince of Pleasure, the Dark Eldar practiced a religion known as the worship of the machine god, and they also started performing terrible experiments on captured Imperial prisoners. This practice created a sort of psychic feedback loop that increased the levels of psychic power within the Dark Eldar, making them even more dangerous. To defend their city, the Dark Eldar created new warriors known as the Incubi, who wore power armor and fought with cruel efficiency. The Dark Eldar were now ready to begin their eternal reign of terror. The Dark Eldar would use their portal network, the Webway, to raid Imperial space. Their attacks were fast and brutal, and they would target large population centers. The Dark Eldar would kidnap thousands of Imperial citizens and then vanish back into the Webway before any sort of response could be mounted. Sometimes, the Dark Eldar would hold captives in special arenas, where gladiatorial combat was used to entertain themselves. If the captive was lucky, they would be put to death quickly. If not, they would be tortured and mutilated for the pleasure of their captors. Occasionally, the Dark Eldar would even spare some of their captives, but these were few and far between. Usually, the spared captives were either given positions within the Dark Eldar society or used as breeding stock. As the millennia passed, the Dark Eldar became more and more depraved. The souls of the captives fueled the Dark Eldar and kept them strong. The Dark Eldar grew in power and influence, and soon they were feared throughout the galaxy. The Dark Eldar weren't afraid to attack anyone, no matter how powerful. They were even known to attack other Chaos forces. The Dark Eldar cared about only one thing, and that was power. They would stop at nothing to obtain it, and they would betray anyone, even Slaanesh herself, if it meant gaining more power. At Heats 8, the Dark Eldar Empire spanned dozens of star systems, but their influence stretched much farther than their direct conquests. The Dark Eldar had agents everywhere, and they were always looking to expand their network. They dealt in all manner of illicit goods, from slaves to weapons to information, and they had a network of spies and informants that was second to none. The Dark Eldar were also known for their cruelty and sadism. They took great pleasure in inflicting pain on others, and they were particularly fond of torturing their enemies. This reputation alone was enough to make many worlds cower in fear before them. But despite their power and influence, the Dark Eldar were never truly safe. They had many enemies, and there was always the threat of a new war on the horizon. One of their greatest enemies were the Orcs, who hated the Dark Eldar for their cruelty and sought to destroy them. The Dark Eldar, in turn, hated the Orcs for their stupidity and brutishness. The two races clashed often, and the battles were always fierce. Another enemy of the Dark Eldar were the Eldar, who viewed their former brethren as corrupted and heretical. The Eldar saw the Dark Eldar as a threat to the entire Eldar race and sought to destroy them. The Dark Eldar, in turn, saw the Eldar as weak and pathetic and took great pleasure in tormenting them. But perhaps the greatest threat to the Dark Eldar was within the Dark Eldar themselves. The warrior houses were constantly vying for power, and there was always the threat of a new war on the horizon. Each house was ruled by a torturer, and the torturers were always looking to expand the power of their house. This led to a constant state of tension and paranoia, and it was only a matter of time before the Dark Eldar turned on themselves. With the rise of the Emperor of Mankind and the founding of the Imperium, the Dark Eldar found a new source of victims. The Imperium was vast and rich, and it was easy prey for the Dark Eldar. The Dark Eldar also learned that the humans were very different from the Eldar. The humans were more durable and resilient, but they were also more numerous. This meant that the Dark Eldar could take greater risks when raiding human worlds, and they soon became bolder and more aggressive. The Dark Eldar also began to develop a taste for human flesh, and this made their raids even more horrific. Today, the Dark Eldar are still a threat to the Imperium. They are fewer in number than they once were, but they are just as cruel and sadistic. The Dark Eldar are led by a triumvirate of the most powerful torturers, and they continue to wage war against the Imperium and anyone else who crosses their path. The Dark Eldar are a reminder of the cruelty and darkness that exists in the universe. They are a force for chaos and destruction, and they will stop at nothing to achieve their goals. So that is the Dark Eldar, and how they became the way they are today. Let me know your thoughts on the Dark Eldar in the comments below. Do you think they are too mean and sadistic? I think that's why they're my favorite. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. And if you enjoyed it, please consider supporting me. But that's it for this video. Until next time, remember to stay vigilant against the Dark Eldar. Blood in the arenas. Yet not all suffering is harvested in silence. The Wyche cults turn agony into spectacle. In vast gladiatorial arenas, the Wyches perform for roaring crowds of Dark Eldar. Each duel a display of both savagery and artistry. To the audience, this is not mere blood sport. It is theater. Here, one name rises above all others. Lilith Hesperax, the Queen of Blades. She moves with such speed and grace that her enemies are cut apart before they even realize the duel has begun. In the arena, Lilith is untouchable, her perfection celebrated as both goddess and executioner. And yet, for all her glory, even Lilith is but another predator in a city of predators. Slaves scream as the barbed hooks drag them away to the pleasure vaults and fighting pits of the citadel. There's no escape from Camorra. If you're not a slave, then you're a predator, hunting slaves or other predators alike. If you're strong enough, you might carve out a small niche for yourself. But Edmonton's survival is a daily struggle. Lilith Hesperax had carved her niche long ago, and it was a glorious one. She lived in the heart of the city in a great mansion overlooking the fighting pits where she trained, the very center of the cruelest, most decadent city in the galaxy. Now, if you have ever seen a live Wyche duel, then you know that they fight with knives. They twist and turn through the air like acrobats, flashing their wicked blades with deadly accuracy. It is a beautiful, terrifying thing to watch, like watching a ballet of death. And the best, the greatest duelist in all of Camorra is none other than Lilith Hesperax. Her favorite arena is the Bloody Labyrinth, an enormous circular arena which is also known as the Bone Orchard. It is a place where entire squads of Sildari warriors have met their doom, where whole armies have been wiped out by the Wyches. Within its vast expanse, Lilith has danced a deadly dance of death with many victims, dismembering them with her 20 Ochulas. That is the name of her knives. Their edges are so keen they almost seem liquid. When she spins them in her hands, they blur together into one long blade, cutting and slicing with lethal precision. These blades are extensions of her will, as deadly as her mind. The very sight of those cruel weapons strikes terror into the hearts of her enemies. She fights without armor, her lithe body a blur of motion as she dances around her victim, ripping and tearing at their flesh. Only once her prey has been sufficiently weakened as she donned her armor, a masterpiece of dark elven craftsmanship, plated with silver and studded with gems. But the armor does little to hide the ferocity of the warrior within, for underneath it, Lilith's muscles bunch and strain as she prepares to deliver the killing blow. A single drop of sweat trickles down her temple, reflecting the light of the torches that illuminate her contorted face. Her eyes blaze with hatred and her teeth are bared in a snarl. A thin trickle of blood runs from her left shoulder, the result of a nasty gash inflicted by one of her victims. She ignores it, though, her entire focus concentrated on her quarry. With a final mighty roar, she brings her knives down in a killing stroke. The victim collapses, and the crowd goes wild. Lilith stands over him, panting heavily, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She looks down at her victim and spits in disgust. He's dead. Of course he's dead. You could tell that by the way his head lolled at such an unnatural angle. Still, she takes pleasure in watching him die. The life ebbs out of him, draining the color from his skin and making his limbs grow cold. She sees the fear in his eyes, the dawning realization that he's been defeated, that he's lost. It's a look she's come to love more than anything else in the world. As soon as the victim is dead, the crowd begins to clamor for more blood. The spectators in the stands are a sea of excited faces, all eager to see the next duel. They cheer and jeer, urging the competitors on to greater feats of bloodshed and violence. But Lilith is done for now. She drops her knives and walks away, leaving the corpse of her victim in the center of the arena. She doesn't need to stick around to watch the next duel. She knows she will win. It's just a matter of who her opponent will be. Next time she steps into the arena, it will be to face a new challenger. She can feel it in her bones, in the very core of her being. It's what drives her, what makes her heart sing. The thrill of the hunt, the joy of the kill. She is a predator, and she is magnificent. She is the Queen of Blades. And while there are many worthy opponents in Karag, none can match her skill. They come at her from all angles, but she seems to know their every move before they make it. She dances around them, her blades flashing, and they can't touch her. One by one, they fall, until only she remains standing in the center of the arena. But Lilith is never satisfied with her victories. No matter how great the opponent, no matter how hard the fight, she always wants more. That's why she challenges everyone. She seeks out the strongest opponent she can find, because she wants to test herself against them. She wants to push herself to her limits, and she's always looking for new and inventive ways to kill her opponents. It's not enough for her to simply defeat them. She has to do it in a way that makes a statement. She has to send a message to the other Wyches, to the other warriors of Camorra. She has to show them that she's the greatest of all. And so, after every duel, after every victory, she adds another notch to her belt. Each one a reminder of the countless foes she has vanquished. Some notches are wider than others. Some are decorated with jewels or bone or metal. Each one tells a story of blood and guts and glory. The other Wyches respect her for it, fear her for it, but they also envy her, because they, too, want to be the greatest. They, too, want to be the Queen of Blades, but only one can hold that title. Only one can be the best, and that one is Lilith Hesperax. She may be the greatest of all the Wyches, but even she is not safe in Camorra, for there are forces at work in the city that are even more powerful than she is. Forces that would see her dead. Forces that would destroy her and everything she stands for. 4 years, Lith has danced on the edge of these forces, avoiding them, outsmarting them. But now they are closing in on her, and she knows that she will have to face them sooner or later. She can feel it in her bones, in the very core of her being. It's what drives her, what makes her heart sing. The thrill of the hunt, the joy of the kill. She is a predator, and she is magnificent. She is the Queen of Blades. The Citadel is a dangerous place, a city of decadence and excess where the rules of normal society do not apply. There are no laws here, only the will of the strongest, and Lilith has found herself at the top of the food chain. But that doesn't mean she's safe. Not by a long shot. There are those who would see her gone, who would tear down everything she has built up and replace it with their own monuments of cruelty and excess. And Lilith knows that she will have to fight tooth and nail to keep what she has. Still, she wouldn't trade it for the galaxy. She loves Camorra, loves the danger, the excitement, the challenge of it all. She wouldn't trade it for anything. For Lilith is a queen, and queens are made to rule. She is the Queen of Blades, and Camorra is her kingdom. Well, thank you all for watching. This is your host, and I will catch you all next time. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Where there's pain, there's pleasure. Where there's hate, there's commerce. Commodus rules. On the farthest reaches of the eastern fringe, hidden among the labyrinthine streets of the great city of Camorra, lie the pleasure grounds of the Wyche cults. That's right, you heard me right. I said pleasure grounds. What kind of sadistic pleasures might those be? Let us find out. Join me, won't you, as I take you on a tour of the legendary arena complex known as the Slake Pits. I know what you're thinking. You think you've seen it all? The Dark Eldar have given you plenty to shock your delicate sensibilities, haven't they? Cruel games, twisted punishments, torturous executions. But hold your horses or whatever it is the kids are saying these days. I'm going to show you something that is beyond anything the light has ever seen. So hold on tight and prepare yourself. Yes, here too, in the heart of the Dark City, there are spectators and athletes. And like any good gladiator games, the crowd loves to cheer their favorites and boo their least favorites. You might almost feel a swell of sympathy for the doomed wretches about to enter the ring if you were Yun, too busy hiding behind the nearest pillar. No, come on now. Don't leave me hanging. Just because you didn't see it doesn't mean it isn't happening. And trust me, you want one to witness the things I am about to show you without some form of protection. It is said that the greatest warriors are those who can make an art form of killing. If that's true, then these warriors are true artists. This is no ordinary combat, mind you, but a carefully choreographed dance of death. To the casual observer, it would look like nothing more than bloodshed and carnage. But there is method to the madness, a cold logic at work here. A single misstep, an opening, however slight, and your opponent will be upon you with needle-sharp blades flashing. Every move is designed not just to harm, but to humiliate, to break the spirit as well as the body. It is agony laid bare. A symphony of screams and steel played out before an audience of eager spectators. And the closer you get, the more the music seems to crescendo. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. My friends, this is the greatest show on earth. This is the White Cult. Their grand arenas are known as the Slake Pits. It is here where the finest duelists from across the whole of Kimura come to show off their skills and climb to the top of the ranks. Each warrior craves the adulation of the crowds, the attention of the nobility, and most importantly, the favor of the great lords and ladies of the local cabal. Win enough matches and you might find yourself elevated from a lowly footslave to a favored consort. Lose too many, and you might find yourself in the audience watching others fight for your entertainment. It's a brutal business, but it's also a very shrewd one. Not everyone who enters the arena does so willingly. Mind you, many of the combatants are chosen for their beauty or their skill, or rather for their potential in those areas. Foot slaves, artisans, and even servants are sometimes plucked from their menial tasks to be thrust into the arena. And when I say thrust, I do mean forced into the ring against their will, struggling and screaming all the while. On rare occasions, noble houses will even pit members of their own family against one another in some twisted test of devotion to the house, or perhaps just a desire to be rid of a troublesome relative. Hey, I'm just the tour guide. I don't judge the tastes of the Dark Eldar. You know how every great city needs a coliseum? Well, here in Kimura, they have something far better. They have the Chaugorian canopy. Oh yes, we're talking big league here, folks. We're talking about an arena capable of holding hundreds of thousands of screaming Dark Eldar fans, all eager to watch the blood sport of their choice. And I mean hundreds of thousands. And yet despite its size, the canopy is never anything less than packed to capacity. The Dark Eldar love their diversions, but none more so than the games. And while you can catch a game on the hololiths in the taverns and gambling halls, nothing beats the real thing. All around the central dome, tiers of seats rise like the layers of a terrible birthday cake. The lowest levels are reserved for the nobility and the wealthy, while the upper levels are crammed full of eager commoners. You might think all the best seats are taken, but that's where you'd be wrong. If you have the coin, you can always charter a box. Just keep your head down and don't ask too many questions. Also, please, don't feed the Yes, that's right, ogrins. Even these monstrous brutes enjoy a good fight, and it can get pretty wild when a bunch of overgorged ogrins start betting on the outcome of a match. I'll just put it this way. You do not want to be the favorite unless you're made of iron and fury. This whole place smells of sweat and blood. Despite the efforts of the Dark Eldar to mask the coppery tang of blood with incense, you can still smell fear on this place. Every so often, an announcement rings out over the crowd, reminding them to keep their distance from the edge of the stands. When someone gets a little too close to the action, though, the response is swift and brutal. Ogres grab the offenders by the scruff of their necks and heave them back into the crowd. Sure, it's dangerous, but isn't that why they're all here? And what is life without a little danger? Hey, I saw a guy just pull a burning chain in his neighbor's face. Hey, fun. Hey. The Emperor protects. Did someone say danger? Have you come to the wrong place, my friend? Because in this corner of the arena, they take things a lot more seriously. Here, in the upper echelons of the White Cults, only the best duelists compete. Those who've proven themselves time and time again. And what are we talking about? These are not young pups. No, Sire. We're talking about veterans who've sliced and diced their way through countless opponents. The best of them, the absolute cream of the crop, are known as the Windwalkers, and let me tell you, there's a reason they have that name. Why don't we talk a bit about them now? The Windwalkers are the pinnacle of the Witch cults, and even among this elite group, there is one who stands alone. Lilith Esperax, the Queen of Blades, is the greatest duelist of all time. Her movements are so fast, so graceful, that her opponents are dead before they know what's happening. And yet, she is far more than a mindless killer. Lith is an artist, a poet, a feint. She fights with such style and panache that her duels become ballets of death. Her blade flashes like lightning, leaving crimson streaks across the faces of her foes. And all the while she dances, leaping and twirling through the air with effortless ease. For the Dark Eldar, it is a sight to behold. For her opponents, it is a death sentence. But remember, even a legend like Lilith is still a predator in a city of predators. No matter how high you climb, there is always someone ready to take your place. And if you stay here long enough, you might just see that happen. Now go on. Get out of here. I think someone wants to use this arena for something a little more personal. And hey, don't forget, on the way out, drop a like on the way to help us reach our goal. Thank you. If the Wyches turned pain into theater, then the Hemlocks turned it into science. This is a world of beauty. The art alone could make an Astarte blush. But who would willingly walk inside this nightmare? Only those brave or foolish enough to face the one called Urian. He is known across the galaxy as the chief among the homunculi, master of the flesh arts. It is said he has studied every twitch of every muscle, every response of every nerve ending. His knowledge of anatomy is so vast that he can reach into a body and rearrange its organs without so much as a scalpel. Some say he turned the great hero Titus, the Lion of Kala, into a puppet of flesh. They say that the lion was fighting in the Emperor's service, a being of pure light and righteous flame until Urian got his claws on him. Now he is little more than a broken toy, his mind-gone body twisted and reassembled. Others say that Urian keeps the great hero alive, sustaining him just beyond death's door, so that he may study the fall of the prime, the slow and agonizing unraveling of a godlike soul. There may be some truth to these legends, but more likely they are just stories whispered by terrified prisoners in the dark corners of haunted nightclubs. For although it is true that Urian Rakarth is a connoisseur of pain, enjoying it even as he inflicts it, he does not do so for the amusement of it. Like all his kind, he sees torment as a new form of art, a sculpture to be chiseled from the raw material of flesh and bone. And like all the best artists, he is utterly ruthless about what he will sacrifice to achieve perfection. Slaves brought before him in chains are not put to death, but offered up as models, their bodies stretched and pulled into strange shapes, contorted and locked in place with clamps and braces. Others have their nervous systems ripped apart and reassembled, turning their minds into landscapes of agony from which they can never escape. Still others have their very souls ripped out and made to writhe like maggots in the skull, forever trapped in a living tomb of flesh. And when the masterpiece is complete, it is set loose into the galaxy as a grotesque, a shambling engine of flesh animated by nothing but rage and pain, a creature so nightmarish that even Chaos Space Marines turn their heads away from it in disgust. Urian takes his work seriously. In fact, he takes it so seriously that he has achieved something that seems almost impossible. Even Chaos, with all its mastery over demons and hellscapes, cannot touch him. Not death, not oblivion, not the warp, not the void, not even time itself. Nothing can end Urian Raktaroth. He has become that which he has studied for millennia, a being who exists outside the natural order, who defies the laws of life and death. No wound can stop him, no blade can cut him down. His limbs will knit themselves back together if torn aside. A bullet through the brain is just a minor inconvenience. A hole in his chest is just a new place for his genius to bloom. Even if every bone in his body is shattered and ground to dust, he will rise again because Urian has become death, and death cannot touch him. And yet his most terrifying creation remains the grotesque, a shambling mass of tortured flesh, animated by nothing but rage and pain. As terrible as they are mere children's toys, compared to the wonders that await those who venture deep into the heart of Cabal. Fodyorion's greatest creations are not things at all, but experiences. Once a victim has been broken, contorted, and locked in place, Urian delights in making them experience things they never could in life. Things like the suffocating pressure of having their entire bodies submerged underwater, or the crushing weight of being buried alive. With Urian at the helm, pain becomes a canvas and the weak and helpless become his art. But how can anyone hope to defeat such a foe? How can anyone stand against the master of pain himself? Even the mightiest warriors hesitate to enter his domain for fear of what they might become. Even the most cunning diplomats avoid his gaze, lest their minds be read and their souls be damned. Even the most powerful psychers are wary of his presence, for fear of what he might do to their powers, to their very essence. The only way to survive an encounter with Urian is to become like him, to embrace the pain and become art, to become one with the torment and transcend it. Or perhaps the only way is simply to destroy him utterly, to burn him away and reduce him to nothing, to deny him his immortality and snuff out his eternal flame. But who could do such a thing? Who could stand against the master of pain and come out on top? The politics of Camorra are a complex web of deceit, double-dealing and backstabbing, where alliances are as fleeting as the whispers on the wind and where the only constant is the lust for more power. The major players in the shadow politics of Camorra can be divided into three: the Cabals, the White Cults, and the Covens. But before we dive into the shadowy depths of Camorra's ruling elite, let's take a moment to appreciate the true architect of this intricate game, the Dark City itself. Camorra was not just built on the ruins of ancient Alacri. It was designed to thrive on chaos. Every twisty alley, every hidden market, every crumbling archway is a testament to the city's hunger for power, a hunger that mirrors the desires of its inhabitants. At the heart of the Dark City are the Cabals, the most prominent and powerful faction in Camorra. Each cabal is a loose alliance of noble houses bound together by blood ties and ancient feuds. They control vast networks of spies and assassins, and their influence stretches far beyond the borders of the Dark City. However, the Cabals are not monolithic. They are divided into countless feuding factions, each vying for more power and influence. At the top of the Cabal hierarchy are the lords, the most powerful nobles in the city. They rule over their domains with an iron fist, crushing any dissent and hoarding vast fortunes. Below them are the Archons, ambitious nobles who constantly scheme and plot to advance their own interests. Then come the heiresses, the leaders of the various noble houses, whose marriages and alliances are the currency of their power. Finally, there are the slaves, the forgotten souls who toil in the shadows and often bear the brunt of the Cabal's machinations. Despite their lowly status, however, the slaves are not powerless. In the cutthroat world of Camorra, even a slave can rise to become a lord. It just takes a little bit of cunning, a lot of ruthlessness, and perhaps a touch of insanity. But even the Cabals fear and respect the White Cults, a trio of powerful organizations that operate in the darkest corners of the Dark City. Each cult is devoted to a different aspect of Slaanesh, the Prince of Pleasure, and they wield their dark powers to great effect. The Black Dragons are a ruthless band of female killers who deal in information and favors, both of which they are willing to extract with extreme prejudice. They are led by the infamous Hex, a master manipulator, who always seems to be one step ahead of her rivals. Then there are the Spider Riders, fanatics, who worship Slaanesh in his aspect as the Lord of Pain. They use drugs, torture, and sadistic rituals to achieve their goals, and their influence in Camorra is both feared and respected. Finally, there are the Choirs of Kiara, a cult that worships Slaanesh as the Lord of the Dance. They use hypnotic music and entrancing rituals to bend the minds of their victims, and their seductive powers are legendary throughout the Dark City. However, despite their differences, the White Cults share a common enemy, a cabal of powerful witches and warlocks, who wield forbidden magic in the darkest corners of Camorra. The Covens are led by the enigmatic Morven, a witch of immense power who seeks to dominate the city with her dark arts. Her followers are scattered throughout the city, hidden in plain sight, and waiting for the moment to strike. The Covens pose a threat to the White Cults, because they represent an unpredictable element in the city's power structure. Magic is a dangerous weapon, and the covens wield it with terrifying skill. Moreover, the covens are not bound by the same rules that govern the cabals and the White cults. They are not constrained by blood ties, ancient feuds, or religious affiliations. This gives them a certain freedom of action that makes them both dangerous and unpredictable. All three factions have their sights set on the ultimate prize: total domination of the Dark City. The cabals seek to expand their power and influence, crushing all opposition and hoarding vast fortunes. The White cults seek to spread their dark influence, corrupting the minds of the city's inhabitants and bending them to their will. And the covens seek to seize control of the city's magic, using it to dominate its people and reshape the city according to their own dark designs. But while these three factions vie for power, there is one entity that looms over them all, the one who truly holds the fate of Camorra in his hands: Estrubel Vecht, the master of the Onyx. Stone Vecht is not a member of any of the three factions. He is an independent variable, a wild card that can turn the balance of power on a whim. Vecht is a brilliant strategist and a ruthless tactician, and he uses his skills to manipulate the other factions to his own ends. He is the puppet master of Camorra's shadow politics, pulling the strings from the shadows and watching as his enemies destroy themselves. But Vecht is not content with merely manipulating the other factions. He has his own ambitions for Camorra. Vecht believes that the city's obsession with pleasure and excess is its greatest weakness. He believes that Camorra must embrace pain and discipline if it is to survive the coming darkness, and so he has taken steps to make Camorra into a city of pain, a city that can stand toe-to-toe with the forces of chaos and the Imperium. Now, some say that Vecht is mad, that his obsession with pain and discipline will lead Camorra to its doom. Others say that Vecht is a necessary evil, that only he can save Camorra from itself. Only time will tell whether Vecht is a savior or a destroyer, whether he will lead Camorra to a new age of glory, or plunge it into eternal darkness. In the meantime, however, Vecht continues to play his game, manipulating his rivals, crushing his enemies, and watching as Camorra tears itself apart in a frenzy of violence and debauchery. So if you ever find yourself caught up in the web of Camorra's shadow politics, be careful who you trust. Remember that in this twisted game, even the victors are ultimately doomed. Thanks for listening, folks. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. And don't forget to check out our other videos. There's something for everyone. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time. There is no greater evil than despair, no darker sin than hopelessness. Such was the grim lesson taught by millennia of strife to the race known as the Drukris, and so it is that the lifeblood of the Dark Eldar is not drawn from within their walls. It is taken from without, through the hidden arteries of the webway. The Cabals launch their lightning raids upon the galaxy. Entire worlds are struck in the span of ours. Cities are depopulated. Civilizations are shattered. To the Imperium, these attacks seem like acts of madness. Raiders who take nothing of value, who vanish before armies can respond. But the truth is far darker. The real prize is suffering. Every scream torn from a captive strengthens the soul of a Druk. Every hour of torment buys them another day of life. Without this harvest, they wither. The Dark Eldar are not conquerors. They are parasites. They cannot build, cannot sustain, cannot rule beyond the walls of their nightmare city. They must ride, again and again, to survive. As humanity spreads across the stars, ever more worlds fall within reach of these ravenous corsairs. Thus, the stage was set for a terrible reckoning. For on one side stood the might of the Imperium, armed with the faith of billions and empowered by the blessings of the Emperor. And on the other were the Dark Eldar, wielding their mastery of the webway and bolstered by centuries of hatred. Soon, the two would collide in a maelstrom of war. It began in the dark heart of the 41st millennium, a time of war unmatched in the history of the galaxy. For within the haunted labyrinth of the webway, the corsairs of Camorra had stirred. Ever since the fall of their kind, the Dark Eldar had retreated into the warp, shunning the light of day and the sight of the Golden Throne. Yet now, the veil between the immaterium and real space was rent, and the Dark Eldar were free to return. free to prey once more upon the unsuspecting galaxy. With numbers swollen by centuries of births in the webway, the Drukhari poured through the newly opened portals and descended upon the unsuspecting worlds of the eastern fringes of the Milky Way. They fell like a plague across the segmentum obscurus, striking at the heartland of human civilization. Their victims were doomed from the first. There could be no defense against such foes. Even Imperial Guard regiments armed to the teeth with lasguns and heavy bolters could only watch in helpless horror as entire cities were emptied in the blink of an eye. No army could stand against the combined might of Drukhari Cabal. A single strike team of 20 warriors could level a tower or decimate a company of space marines. But the Dark Eldar did not merely slay their victims. Oh, no. That would have been too quick, too easy, and it would have denied them their true prize. The Dark Eldar revel in pain, in fear and despair, and so they took their victims aboard their vessels and carried them back to Camorra, where a fate far worse than death awaited. Thus began the long night of terror across the segment of Oscurus, a nightmare from which many souls would never awaken. Whole worlds were blotted out, vanished in an instant as if erased from the very flow of time. Some Dark Eldar raiders even claimed trophies from their hunts, taking prisoners back to their home city to be sold as slaves. These unfortunate souls were forced to endure unimaginable tortures, fueling the dark powers of the Drukhari and providing them with the sustenance they needed to survive. Even the mightiest lords of the Imperium could only watch in helpless fury as the Dark Eldar mocked them from their strongholds. Within the webway, the Drukharis had struck at the core of human civilization, and the response of the Imperium was swift and terrible. A great crusade was launched into the eastern part of the galaxy to hunt down the Corsairs, but it soon became clear that the Dark Eldar were too cunning and too swift to be caught. They melted away into the webway whenever Imperial forces drew near, striking back when least expected. Yet the Dark Eldar were making a grave mistake. In their arrogance, they had misjudged their foe. The Imperium may be slow to anger, but its wrath is terrible to behold. And so the Crusaders pressed on, determined to root out the Corsairs once and for all. Aboard their vessels, vast fleets of starships battled across the void. On countless worlds, regiments of Space Marines and Imperial Guard clashed with Dark Eldar raiders. Inch by inch, the Imperium drove the Corsairs back into the webway. The Dark Eldar were forced to flee, carrying their prisoners and their shame back to the city of Camorra. And there, the tables would turn. What the Dark Eldar lacked in numbers, they made up for in skill and ferocity. They are masters of torture and torment. The seduct turned the very essence of pain into a weapon, twisting the emotions of their victims and using their anguish against them. Many a warrior has fallen victim to the wiles of a seductionist, their last moments filled with regret and remorse. Others, unable to bear the torments inflicted upon them, turned on their companions, their minds broken by the agony they endured. Then there were the grotesquely mutated homunculi, whose very touch brought pain and disease. These twisted beings experimented on their captives, seeking to discover new and more effective methods of inflicting suffering. Yet, perhaps the most terrifying of all the Dark Eldar were the Talos, monstrous beings of pure hatred and violence, hunted and persecuted throughout their lives. The Talos became consumed with rage, and their strength increased until they were finally transformed into hulking beasts of pure physical power. The Talos were the perfect weapons of the Dark Eldar, unstoppable killing machines that tore through their enemies with ease. But the Dark Eldar were not just masters of pain and suffering. They were also cunning strategists and ruthless killers. Their warriors fought with a desperate ferocity, knowing that they had nothing to lose. They attacked with lightning speed, appearing and disappearing at will. And when they struck hard, draining the life force of their victims and adding it to their own. Even the mightiest of the Imperium's warriors were hard-pressed to withstand the onslaught of the Dark Eldar. Space Marines found themselves locked in deadly duels with the seductionists, desperately trying to resist the wiles of their foes. Meanwhile, the Talos rampaged through the ranks of the Imperial Guard, tearing through whole squads with ease. And all the while, the Helmicalists experimented on the wounded and dying, seeking to learn new ways to inflict pain and suffering. Despite their ferocity, the Dark Eldar were ultimately driven back into the webway, but not before they had inflicted terrible damage on the Imperium. Whole worlds had been drained of their life force. Countless souls had been tortured and mutilated, and the Dark Eldar had proven to be a foe that even the might of the Imperium could not hope to defeat. Still, the Dark Eldar overplayed their hand. In their arrogance, they had thought to conquer the galaxy. But they had forgotten the true meaning of fear, and in doing so, they had unleashed a terror that would consume them all. For the Dark Eldar had awakened a power that even they could not hope to resist. As the Dark Eldar fled into the depths of the webway, the human spirit of vengeance pursued them. The Crusaders of the Imperium, fueled by the righteous fury of the Emperor's children, pressed on relentless in their pursuit. Deeper and deeper they went into the webway, following the fleeing Dark Eldar. And as they went, they uncovered secrets that should have remained hidden forever. For the webway was no mere transportation system. It was a gateway to the darkest depths of the human psyche, a realm where nightmares took shape and the fabric of reality was torn asunder. The Crusaders were confronted by horrors that defied belief, creatures of pure evil that sought to tear their souls apart. But the Imperial warriors stood firm, their faith in the Emperor giving them strength. Yet as the pursuit continued, it became clear that the webway was a trap. The Dark Eldar had lured the Imperials deep into their own territory, where they would be vulnerable to attack. And as the Imperial forces pushed on, they found themselves under siege by the full might of the Dark Eldar. Once again, the tables were turned and the Dark Eldar unleashed their full fury upon the Imperials. But the Imperial warriors stood firm, their determination to punish the Dark Eldar unwavering. As the battle raged, the Imperials realized that the Dark Eldar had woven a trap of their own design. The very structure of the webway was collapsing around them, threatening to crush both the Dark Eldar and the Imperials beneath its collapsing weight. Faced with annihilation, the Dark Eldar made a final stand, throwing everything they had left into the battle. But it was in vain. The Imperials, fueled by their righteous anger, fought with a ferocity that the Dark Eldar could not hope to match. Slowly but surely, the Dark Eldar were driven back, their forces shattered and their will to fight broken. In the end, only a handful of Dark Eldar escaped the destruction of the webway, fleeing back to the safety of Camorra, carrying with them the knowledge that they had been defeated by the very humans they had sought to enslave. The crusade against the Dark Eldar may have been over, but the war was far from finished. For the Dark Eldar were a patient and cunning foe, and they would be back. And when they did, the Imperials would be ready for them. There's no freedom in self-destruction, but the Drukhari would have you believe otherwise. They revel in their decadence, taking pleasure in every sin and vice that humanity abhors, and yet they are slaves to the same hunger that created the ruinous powers. Their addictions know no satiation, their appetites no appeasement. If anything, it only makes them hungrier for more. What compels these creatures to this self-destructive path? Are they beyond redemption? Or does something far worse control them? Find out now on this channel. For the Drukhari, or Dark Eldar, as they were once known, are among the most pitiful and contemptible of the 38 different races in the Warhammer 40k universe. They despise the Imperium's chains of duty and faith that bind humanity and laugh at the Craftworld Eldar for burying themselves in ritual and discipline. And yet the Drukhari are the most enslaved of all. Every moment of their lives is dictated by hunger. Every pleasure is fleeting. Every victory fades into the need for more pain, more souls, more blood. They cannot stop, for if Teidoshi, who thirsts, will take them, body and soul, into an eternity of torment. Once upon a time, before the fall of their empire, the Eldar were a proud and noble race, masters of technology and magic. But their hubris led to their downfall. The Eldar had mastered the art of pleasure and lived lives of luxury and decadence. But this came at a cost. In their pursuit of pleasure, they tapped into the warp, the Imperium, a realm of pure psychic energy where the emotions of sentient beings converge. But the warp is a dangerous place, and the Eldar's unchecked hedonism opened them up to its corrupting influence. As Slaanesh, the embodiment of excess and indulgence, grew in power, so did the suffering of the Eldar. Their worlds were torn apart, their populations slaughtered or enslaved, and their very souls corrupted. But some Eldar, known as Craftworlders, managed to escape Slaanesh's clutches and preserve their race through cunning, diplomacy, and sheer willpower. Others, however, succumbed to the dark side and became Drukhari, twisted parodies of their former selves, addicted to the pleasures of pain and the taste of suffering. And then there are the Drukhari, also known as the Dark Eldar, who represent the absolute worst of the Eldar race. The Drukhari are the epitome of excess and depravity, driven by an insatiable hunger for pain and suffering. Living on the fringes of the galaxy, they eke out a miserable existence on a patchwork of asteroid fortresses and derelict craft worlds, preying on the weak and innocent to slake their bloodlust. Their society is built on sadism and oppression, with entire cities designed to inflict maximum torment on their victims. It's hard to overstate how despicable the Drukhari are, even by the standards of Warhammer 40k. They're the ultimate villains, the kind that make you want to wipe them off the face of the planet just for fun. No mercy, no quarter, no hesitation. But what's really going on here? Why are the Drukhari so obsessed with pain and suffering? And is there any hope for redemption for these fallen creatures? Let's dive deeper into the lore and find out. Before we get into the real meat of this video, let me tell you about our amazing community. We have the Bountiful Intergalactic Community, where we talk about everything under the sun and have regular contests and giveaways. So come join us and see what it's all about. The Drukhari homeworld was once Komora, a jewel of the Eldar Empire, and one of the greatest examples of Eldar architecture in the galaxy. But when Slaanesh turned against her own children and devoured much of the Eldar race, Komora was lost. The planet fell into chaos as entire cities were consumed by Slaanesh's followers and turned into hellscapes of flesh and metal. Only a handful of craftworlds managed to flee the destruction and preserve their culture and history, while the rest of the Druk were left to wander the galaxy as refugees stranded on derelict ships and hollowed-out asteroids forced to prey on the weak to survive. To make matters worse, the Drukhari quickly developed a taste for suffering and torment, and they began to live for the pleasures of pain and the taste of fear. Cities were redesigned to maximize suffering. Entire populations were enslaved and tortured for sport, and the thirst for blood became unquenchable. This addiction to pain and suffering has made the Drukhari the scourge of the galaxy. They are feared and hated by all who know of their existence, and they are hunted down by the combined forces of the Imperium and the craft worlds whenever possible. The Drukhari are an extremely diverse race with a wide variety of appearances, depending on where they were born and what kind of life they lived before becoming Drukhari. However, they all share one commonality: an obsession with pain and suffering. Some Drukhari are pale and emaciated, while others are grotesquely fat. Some have skin like polished marble, while others have bodies covered in scars and tattoos. Some have faces that are beautiful and haunting, while others are twisted and demonic. All of them are united by a single purpose: to inflict as much pain and suffering on others as possible. Drukhari society is based around sadism and decadence, with entire cities designed to maximize the suffering of their victims. They take great pleasure in humiliating and torturing their prisoners, and they revel in the screams of pain and agony. The Drukhari also have a deep-rooted hatred for the craft worlds, whom they see as weak and decadent. They mock the craft worlds for their rituals and traditions, and for their refusal to embrace the pleasures of pain. In their eyes, the craft worlds are pathetic and decadent, and they deserve to be punished. The Drukhari have a wide range of weapons and technology at their disposal, but they prefer to use whatever means necessary to inflict pain and suffering on their victims. They are not above using crude weapons like knives and clubs, if it means that they can cause more pain and suffering. The Drukhari are a highly adaptable and resilient race, capable of surviving in the most extreme environments. They are also incredibly cunning and ruthless, and they will stop at nothing to achieve their goals. Now let's get back to the video. There is no freedom in self-destruction, but the Drukhari would have you believe otherwise. They revel in their decadence, taking pleasure in every sin and vice that humanity abhors, and yet they are slaves to the same hunger that created the ruinous powers. Their addictions know no satiation. Their appetites, no appeasement. If anything, it only makes them hungrier for more. What compels these creatures to this self-destructive path? Are they beyond redemption, or does something far worse control them? The Drukhari had been cursed by She Who Thirsts. She Who Thirsts is a demon, prince of Slaanesh, and the ruler of the Drukhari race. She is the embodiment of excess and indulgence, and she is responsible for the corruption of the Eldar and the creation of the Drukhari. She Who Thirsts is a being of pure psychic energy, and she feeds on the emotions of sentient beings. She is drawn to the negative emotions such as pain, suffering, fear, and hate. And she uses these emotions to grow in power. When the Eldar were at the height of their power, she who thirsts began to whisper to them, tempting them with promises of pleasure and indulgence. She promised them a world where they could indulge in every desire and satisfy every whim. And many Eldar fell for her promises. They gave in to their darkest desires and embraced the pleasures of pain and suffering. As the Eldar indulged in their newfound pleasures, she who thirsts grew in power. She used their negative emotions to fuel her own growth, and she eventually became strong enough to turn on the Eldar and devour them. She who thirsts is a being of pure evil, and she takes great pleasure in the suffering of others. She is responsible for the creation of the Drukhari, and she rules over them with an iron fist. She demands that they bring her souls to feed her power, and she punishes them severely if they fail to meet her expectations. So what does this all mean? The Drukhari are trapped in a never-ending cycle of addiction and despair. They are slaves to their own desires, and they are doomed to suffer for eternity. There is no hope for redemption for these fallen creatures. They are beyond the pale, beyond the reach of mercy. They are the ultimate villains, the kind that make you want to wipe them off the face of the planet just for fun. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to support the channel. Also, check out our other videos and join our community. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time. In the 41st millennium, there are few things more horrifying than a single drop of blood spilled upon the cold void of space. In the depths of the Imperium, where souls are ground into dust and light bends to the whims of demons, even the sight of blood inspires nothing but revulsion and fear. For within this crimson droplet, one can glimpse an eternity of torment, an endless abyss of agony and despair. This is the heritage of the Dark Eldar, a legacy that binds them to the service of their Dark Master. Slaanesh dooms them to an existence of perpetual suffering. When we think of the Dark Eldar, most of us imagine twisted, sadistic creatures with an obsession for pain and pleasure. But what really makes these creatures tick? What is the driving force behind their actions? Are they just mindless sadists, or is there more to them than meets the eye? Let's find out in today's episode. This is a video about the greatest evil in the Warhammer 40k universe, the Dark Eldar, a race born from suffering and condemned to an eternity of it. We'll be looking at the Dark Eldar society, culture, and beliefs. So if you're a fan of Warhammer 40k, or just love a good horror story, then stay tuned. The Dark Eldar, also known as the Drukhari, are a race of sadistic and depraved aliens in the Warhammer 40k universe. They hail from the planet Camorra, which is located in the unstable region of the galaxy known as the Warp. The Dark Eldar are one of the most terrifying and formidable races in the 41st millennium. They are masters of torture and sadism, and their very essence is tied to the suffering of others. Contrary to popular belief, the Dark Eldar aren't evil simply because they enjoy inflicting pain and suffering on others. Their sadism is actually a byproduct of their physiology and a desperate attempt to survive in a hostile universe. The Dark Eldar are cursed to exist in a state of constant torment, and they must constantly feed on the emotions of others in order to stave off their own inevitable destruction. This need for torment is deeply ingrained in their nature, and it drives them to commit unspeakable acts of cruelty and depravity. The Dark Eldar are a race of true monsters, driven by an insatiable hunger for torment and suffering. But what is the source of this curse, and how did it come to be? To understand the Dark Eldar, we must first look to their past. The Dark Eldar were once a noble and proud race, known as the Eldari. However, they fell from grace when they embraced the delights of the Warp and became corrupted by its power. When the Emperor of Mankind came to the Eldari homeworld of Eldoria, he was appalled by the decadence and corruption that had taken hold of the Eldari people. Only a small fraction of the Eldari, known as the Asuryani, rejected the corrupting influence of the Warp and managed to retain their nobility and honor. The rest of the Eldari, including those who became the Dark Eldar, were consumed by the pleasures of the Warp and became twisted and corrupted in the process. As the Dark Eldar began to embrace their sadistic tendencies, they retreated into the darkest corners of the Warp, seeking to escape the notice of the other races of the galaxy. It was here in the shadowy realms of the Warp that they developed their twisted society and culture. One of the most significant aspects of Dark Eldar society is their total commitment to hedonism. The Dark Eldar believe that the only purpose of life is to seek out and indulge in pleasure. They take this to such an extreme that they are willing to do anything to obtain their desired sensations, no matter how cruel or depraved. This could mean torturing prisoners to death or using slaves for their own amusement. But for the Dark Eldar, these actions are justified as a means to an end. They see themselves as artists, and their victims as their canvas, molding them into works of art through their suffering. Another key aspect of Dark Eldar culture is their obsession with pain. The Dark Eldar believe that pain is the ultimate test of pleasure, and they willingly inflict pain on themselves and others to achieve a higher level of euphoria. This could involve piercing their flesh with sharp objects or engaging in combat with other races, all in the name of achieving the perfect balance between pain and pleasure. For the Dark Eldar, pain is not something to be avoided, but rather something to be embraced and explored. The Dark Eldar are also known for their mastery of technology, particularly their ability to create weapons and devices that cause great pain and suffering. They are also skilled in the use of magic, which they use to enhance their sadistic tendencies and corrupt the minds of their victims. All of these aspects of Dark Eldar culture and society are rooted in their desire to escape the torment of their own existence. By embracing sadism, hedonism, and a mastery of pain, the Dark Eldar seek to distract themselves from their own suffering and find some semblance of pleasure in the midst of their torment. It is a coping mechanism born out of desperation, and it is one that has allowed them to survive in a galaxy that has long sought to destroy them. Now, let's get into the real meat of this video. The dreams of the Dark Eldar. Dreams are a fascinating aspect of the human experience. They allow us to explore the deepest recesses of our minds and provide a window into our subconscious thoughts and emotions. But what about the dreams of a creature as terrifying and depraved as the Dark Eldar? What could their dreams possibly reveal about these sadistic aliens? Well, according to the ancient texts of the Dark Eldar, their dreams are filled with torment, suffering, and a deep-seated fear of annihilation. The Dark Eldar believe that their race is cursed to an eternity of torment, and their dreams are a manifestation of this curse. In their dreams, they are pursued by monstrous creatures that represent their own inner darkness, and they are forced to flee through nightmarish landscapes that reflect their own shattered psyches. These dreams are not merely symbolic. They are a literal representation of the Dark Eldar's place in the warp. As we mentioned earlier, the Dark Eldar are forever trapped in the Imperium, and their dreams are a reflection of this eternal damnation. But the Dark Eldar don't just dream of their own suffering. They also dream of the suffering of others. This is because their very essence is tied to the emotions of other beings, and they must constantly feed on the emotions of others in order to sustain themselves. In their dreams, the Dark Eldar prey on the fears and pain of other creatures, reveling in their terror and agony. This is where the Dark Eldar's sadism truly lies. They are not merely driven to seek out pleasure for themselves, but they must also inflict pain on others to quench their insatiable thirst for torment. It is important to note that the Dark Eldar are not the only ones who dream. Other races in the Warhammer 40k universe also dream. However, the dreams of the Dark Eldar are the only ones that are literally a representation of their existence. The dreams of other races may reflect their own internal conflicts or provide a glimpse into their subconscious desires. But the dreams of the Dark Eldar are an integral part of their existence. They are a manifestation of their curse, a reflection of their place in the warp, and a literal representation of their sadistic nature. And finally, let's talk about the screams of the Dark Eldar. When we think of the Dark Eldar, the image of a creature that revels in pain and suffering often comes to mind. But have you ever wondered why the Dark Eldar scream in the night? What is it that drives them to utter these blood-curdling cries that echo through the darkest corners of the warp? For the Dark Eldar, screaming in the night is not merely a sign of pain or suffering. It is a release, a way to let go of the torment that consumes their very being. As we have discussed earlier, the Dark Eldar are cursed to an eternity of suffering, and their dreams are filled with the echoes of this torment. In the depths of their dreams, they are pursued by monstrous creatures that represent their own inner darkness, and they are forced to flee through nightmarish landscapes that mirror their shattered psyches. This constant struggle between the Dark Eldar and their inner demons is played out in the physical world through their screams. When the Dark Eldar scream in the night, they are not merely expressing their pain, but also confronting their inner demons. The Dark Eldar are truly a terrifying and enigmatic race. Their sadism and decadence are legendary throughout the galaxy, and their very existence is a testament to the horrors that can unfold in the darkest corners of the warp. Their dreams are not merely a reflection of their tortured souls, but a literal representation of their place in the universe. And their screams in the night are not merely cries of pain, but a confrontation with the very darkness that consumes them. Now, check out this video next. For all the galaxy's knowledge and its vast reaches, it knows little of the Dark Eldar. To most, they are rumor spirits, raiders, phantoms in the void. But for those who have seen them, who have felt the cold grip of their knives, or heard the laughter in the dark, the memory never fades. For if the Imperium fears the death of flesh, and the Chaos God's hunger for the corruption of spirit, then the Dark Eldar represents something far worse. A life prolonged not by hope, but by suffering, and somewhere, in the deepest pits of Camorra, where even light refuses to go, the next harvest is already being prepared. A craft world drifts through the Imperium, pursued by a nightmare. It twists and writhes like a beast of pure shadow, lashing out with tendrils of darkness that strike the craft world as blows from a whip. Bolts of void light lance from its head, searing the very fabric of spacetime as it tries to pierce the defenses of its prey. The craft world shudders, its webway reactors straining against the dimensional pressures that threaten to crush them. Within the craft world, alarms blare and the air crackles with psychic power as the defenders brace against the psychic onslaught tearing at their minds. But the nightmare is relentless, and soon the defenses of the craft world begin to fail. A tear appears in the shimmering field that surrounds it, a wound that will bring death and worse to all within. Desperation grips the defenders, but there is no escape. As the nightmare closes in, only the certainty of doom remains, and from the heart of the maelstrom, three figures watch with amusement. The first two need little introduction. The tall, lithe warrior is a Dark Eldar, her face hidden behind a featureless black mask, her body clad in midnight blue armor that seems to drink in the surrounding darkness. In her right hand, she holds a wickedly curved knife that practically drips with an unnatural ichor. Beside her stands a Grox, twisted and grotesque, yet strangely majestic in its own way. Its bulbous eyes burn with baleful light, and its mandibles click together in anticipation of the feast to come. But the third member of this unholy trio is less expected. A human female, clad in black leather and armed with a wicked-looking whip. Her face is pale, almost translucent, and her eyes glow with an inner light that speaks of terrible power. On her wrist, a single teardrop-shaped gem pulses with cold fire, a relic of her former life that now serves as a focus for her dark powers. The Dark Elder turns to her companion and speaks in a voice like silken shadows. "Soon we will feast, my queen." The woman smiles, a flash of white teeth in the darkness. "Patience, my love. Let us savor the terror of our prey." They are almost at the point of maximum despair. Just a little longer and then the harvest will begin. With that, she raises her hands, and the grotesque roars its approval. As the nightmare closes in, the defenders of the craft world grow increasingly desperate, but their distress is music to the ears of the Dark Eldar and their companions. For what is about to unfold is more than a mere attack. It is a ritual, a grim parody of the festivals held by the craft worlds, a celebration of pain and despair, a welcoming of new souls into the ever-hungry embrace of slumber. With a final surge of power, the nightmare tears the craft world's defenses apart, spilling its passengers out into the void. Shrieks of terror and agony fill the Imperium as soul after soul is claimed by the waiting darkness. The Dark Eldar laughs, a sound of pure malice and delight, and unsheathes her knives, eager to claim her own piece of the pie. But the queen is not so eager. She watches with cold amusement as the nightmare subsumes the last of the craft world's defenders, taking her time to savor the moment. At last, when the feasting is finished and the Grox is licking its chops, she turns to a companion and purrs. "Did you enjoy our little game, my love?" The Dark Eldar nods, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "We could do this again sometime, my queen." "Perhaps," the woman replies, her voice a sibilant whisper, "but I think it's time to return home. There will be other souls to harvest in the future, and Camorra hungers." With that, she turns, and strides towards the open doorway of the nightmare, disappearing into the swirling darkness. The Dark Eldar and the Grotesque exchange a look before following their queen, eager to share in whatever delights await them in the City of a Thousand Sorrows, somewhere deep within the caverns of Camorra. A bell tolls, marking the arrival of a new harvest and the endless cycle of pain and pleasure that is the way of the Dark Eldar. And so the story ends, or perhaps it's only just beginning, for in the warp-infested void where the petals of Slaanesh bloom in shades of crimson and violet, the Dark Eldar and their allies are never far from the hunt, and the galaxy knows little of the Dark Eldar. To most, they are rumor spirits, raiders, phantoms in the void. But for those who have seen them, who have felt the cold grip of their knives, or heard the laughter in the dark, the memory never fades. For if the Imperium fears the death of flesh, and the Chaos Gods hunger for the corruption of spirit, then the Dark Eldar represents something far worse. A lie prolonged not by hope, but by suffering. And somewhere, in the deepest pits of Camorra, where even light refuses to go, the next harvest is already being prepared.